Outriders combines slick aggressive combat, a build system that encourages creativity, imaginative and awesome looking loot, and without doubt the best transmog system in any looter shooter, all wrapped up in a B-movie sci-fi universe. But is it the best looter shooter ever? Outriders launched back in April 2021 to fairly positive reviews, which highlighted the combination of statistically gratifying superpowers and destructive weaponry, some really cool monsters and environments, and a loot grind that, while not revolutionary, did offer some great looking options. However, this was let down by a buggy launch period, including the now infamous gear wipe, a frustratingly laggy multiplayer experience, and the lack of variety in the endgame gameplay loop. While Outriders was billed as a one and done game, the developers People Can Fly provided significant post-launch support, addressing the technical issues, rebalancing the game, and in the New Horizon patch adding content and quality of life features. In June 2022, the WorldSlayer DLC was launched, expanding on the base campaign and adding to the in-game content available with the Trials of Tara Guitar. So, is Outriders any good? The setting for Outriders is a very familiar one. We've destroyed the Earth. Yet again. After an 83-year journey, the survivors reach Enoch, a perfect planet to rebuild on. Or maybe not. The planet is racked by destructive anomaly storms, and after being hit by one and somehow surviving, you are put into cryo for 31 years. You wake to a living nightmare. The first thing that you will notice for the campaign is that it's very linear. Complete Zone A to move to Zone B, and so on. This game is the polar opposite of open world, which is both a positive and a negative. While it would have been great to have more freedom to explore Enoch, having smaller zones has allowed PCF to curate the encounters in those zones in a more tightly controlled way. These smaller zones also allow for some great set pieces. The starting locations bear obvious comparisons to World War I, with its bleak trench warfare, which telegraphs how far humanity has fallen since arriving on Enoch. These locations culminate in a mad dash across no man's land to engage the insurgents, and our first encounter with Moloch. One big downside of how the game has been broken up into these small encounters is that each feels too short, too small in its aspirations. The dash across no man's land could have been an epic set piece, clearing trenches and bunkers, reminiscent of the iconic D-Day landing in Call of Duty. Instead, we get a few waves of enemies and it's over, leaving us to rue a missed opportunity. And that in many ways sums up the entire game. Once past these opening zones, the world of Enoch is slowly revealed. What PCF have created here is actually quite incredible. Each zone has a distinctive feel to it, from the icy mountain passes through the dense jungle to the arid desert, each of which includes insights into the natives of the planet. The story provides a reason for why you should travel across the world, but never truly engages you. Ultimately, this is because there is no reason to care. The game needs a focal point, a villain that makes you want to get to the journey's end. Without that, the majority of the story becomes a retelling of the history of the planet, its lore and inhabitants. When a villain is introduced late in the campaign, you are left confused as to why, and the feeling that it was only introduced to provide a final boss battle. PCF clearly recognised this, and in the WorldSlayer DLC did introduce a protagonist, but much like the main campaign, character development for her and your companions is largely non-existent, and so in the end there is no reason to really care about them, which is a shame, as some of the voice acting is actually very good. And that leaves us with what the game is, a series of great looking zones which provide different combat scenarios for us to overcome. The saving grace for the game is that the third person combat, build creation and loot are all excellent. The combat in Outriders weaves great looking, over the top skills with very solid gunplay. Killing enemies quicker than they can kill you is the name of the game, as self-healing comes from damage or kills. It is fast, frenetic and ultimately brutally fun. There is sufficient variety in the enemies that you face to make it challenging and interesting, with only the different humanoid races being too similar in their archetypes for comfort. The 4 classes bosses in the game are very unique with a distinctive playstyle. The Devastator is a lumbering rock golem that has defensive and earth skills. The Technomancer is a ranged DPS using gadgets, freezing and toxic skills. The Trickster is a space assassin, a highly mobile close range DPS who can twist time and space. And finally there is the Pyromancer, who has a range of fire related skills for dealing mid-range damage. What makes build creation so great is the huge variety of viable builds in the game. With 8 skills per character, class trees that buff either your weapon damage, skill based damage or survivability, and literally hundreds of mods on your weapon and armour to buff your build, there are near endless combinations to try out and perfect. On top of that, there are a ton of legendary weapons and gear sets to chase after, all of which look awesome and come with unique mods and bonuses. Gear sets have powerful 3-set bonuses which buff your skills for more damage output or survivability. While most gear comes with 2 mods, WorldSlayer introduced Apocalypse gear, which comes with 3, which in one fell swoop made the loot grind punishing and frustrating. With no way to upgrade gear, any non-Apocalypse gear becomes useless, and very quickly the game becomes a dismantling simulator. Speaking of the end game, in Outriders this is limited to 2 activities. Expeditions, which came with the base game, and are a series of connected arenas with a large number of elite and non-elite enemies. And in WorldSlayer, the Trials of Tara Guitar were added to the game to address the lack of endgame variety. The problem is that fundamentally the Trials are just an extended expedition with the occasional boss fight and a slightly higher difficulty. Even the boss fights are limited. 3 of the 5 bosses are identical. None of them really call on us to play any differently from normal or do anything but play lip service to the boss mechanic. These sections ultimately become a DPS check, wipe out the boss before they even get to their mechanic. The endgame becomes very repetitive as a result. The game is crying out for different game modes, but what it actually has is the level grind. This has to be one of the most painful and pointless grinds ever introduced into a game, albeit Destiny 2 tries hard. The only reason to grind to max level is for the higher drop rate of Apocalypse gear. That's it. No content is locked behind a power level. No new enemy or boss mechanics are introduced at higher levels. No special loot. On top of that, the grind is painful to the extreme. Initially gaining levels is a quick process, but very quickly you're looking at hours or even days just to move up one level.
One eternity later.
This lack of endgame content and the painful grind have resulted in a massive drop in the player base since launch, albeit those that remain are very dedicated and active. Issues with multiplayer have been reduced, but crossplay still struggles with poor hit detection and lag. The game can be played completely solo, and in some ways this has led to the issues of the game. All content has been balanced for both solo and group play, removing many options from the game, like more complex boss mechanics that require a team to coordinate. Outriders is in many ways still stuck in no man's land. As a one and done game, it cannot provide reasons for players to come back every week. As a balanced game for solo and group play, it removes variety from its gameplay. And ultimately, while its core combat, build creation and loot are all fantastic, the lack of replayable content and a painful grind is keeping it from breaking free and becoming more than the sum of its parts. Now, if all this leaves you desperate for a looter shooter with more endgame than the Avengers, then check out this video here.